Hello there, and welcome to the Night Science Facts channel. Tonight, we'll be turning our attention inward. Not outward to the stars or the ocean or the canopy of a distant rainforest, but inward to the quiet interior of your own body and to the small, extraordinary organ that has been working on your behalf every single moment of your life, without pause, without rest, without ever once asking anything of you in return. Tonight, we are going to spend some time with the human heart. Right now, as you settle in and let the day grow quieter around you, your heart is beating. It has been beating since before you were born, since you were a tiny cluster of cells no larger than a grain of rice, before you had a name or a face or a thought. It will go on beating, in all likelihood, through every night of sleep that remains to you. It beats while you dream. It beats while you rest. It beats in the small hours of the morning, when the world is at its quietest, and it beats in the noise and rush of the busiest afternoon. You have never had to remember to make it beat. You have never had to concentrate on keeping it going. It simply does what it does, what it has been doing for your entire life, with a reliability so complete and so constant that most of us go entire days without a single thought for it. Tonight, we are going to think about it, gently, slowly, with the care and curiosity it deserves. Take a moment now to settle in completely. Let your blanket or covers rest softly around you. Let your pillow hold your head without effort. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands rest wherever they have naturally fallen. You don't need to do anything tonight except breathe and listen. And perhaps, if you are still and quiet enough, you may even feel it. That steady, patient rhythm somewhere in your chest. That quiet drumbeat that has accompanied every moment of your life. The heart doing what it does right now as you rest. We have 100 gentle, unhurried facts waiting for you. Each one is a small window into the most faithful and tireless organ in the human body. A window into biology and history and the quiet miracle of being alive. So let your breathing slow. Let the room grow still. And let us begin. The heart is often described as being roughly the size of a clenched fist, and this is a remarkably accurate approximation for most adults. In the average adult, the heart measures approximately 12 centimeters from top to bottom, 8 to 9 centimeters across at its widest point, and about 6 centimeters from front to back. It weighs between 280 and 340 grams in most adults, slightly heavier in men than in women on average. This modest size is, when you stop to consider it, one of the more astonishing things about the heart. An organ smaller than a grapefruit, lighter than a can of soup, nestled behind the breastbone in the center of the chest. And yet, this small thing sustains the entire vast operation of the human body, pumping blood through roughly 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels, delivering oxygen to 37 trillion cells every single day, without stopping. The heart's power is not about size. It is about consistency, efficiency, and the extraordinary design of a pump that has been refined by evolution over hundreds of millions of years. Small, steady, and utterly reliable. The heart is perhaps the finest argument nature has ever made for the virtue of compact, unhurried diligence. On an average day, the human heart beats approximately 100,000 times. In a year, that is roughly 35 million beats. Over a 70-year lifetime, the heart beats somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.5 billion times. 2.5 billion beats, each one a small contraction of muscle, a small surge of pressure, a small pulse of blood moving outward through the vessels. Each one unremarkable in itself. Each one, in its totality, the sustaining rhythm of a human life. This number, 100,000 beats per day, represents a resting heart rate of approximately 60 to 100 beats per minute, which is the normal adult range. During sleep, the rate slows. During exercise or moments of stress or excitement, it rises. But through all the variation of a day and a life, the heart keeps beating, adjusting, adapting, always finding its way back to rhythm. The heart is, at its core, a muscle, a very specialized and extraordinary muscle, but a muscle nonetheless. It is composed primarily of cardiac muscle tissue, a type of muscle unique to the heart that does not exist anywhere else in the body. Unlike the skeletal muscles that move your limbs, which are under voluntary control, cardiac muscle contracts automatically, continuously, driven by its own internal electrical system. Unlike smooth muscle, which lines the walls of blood vessels and digestive organs and works slowly and involuntarily, cardiac muscle is capable of rapid, powerful, rhythmic contractions. It is designed to do one thing and to do it perpetually, without fatigue, for a lifetime. The word for the heart's ability to generate its own electrical impulses, its own beat, independent of any external instruction, is called automaticity. The heart does not need the brain to tell it when to beat. It has its own pacemaker, its own rhythm, its own deep internal drive. In a very real sense, the heart knows what to do. It has always known. The human heart is divided into 4 chambers, arranged in 2 pairs stacked atop each other. The upper 2 chambers are called the atria, singular, atrium, the right atrium and the left atrium. The lower 2 chambers are called the ventricles, the right ventricle and the left ventricle. The right side of the heart, the right atrium and right ventricle, receives oxygen-depleted blood from the body and pumps it to the lungs, where it picks up fresh oxygen. The left side, the left atrium and left ventricle, receives this newly oxygenated blood from the lungs and pumps it out to the rest of the body. These 2 circuits, the pulmonary circuit to the lungs and the systemic circuit to the body, work simultaneously, the 2 sides of the heart beating in coordinated rhythm, never mixing their contents. The 4-chambered heart is an elegant solution to the problem of running 2 separate circulatory loops in a single organ, and it is shared by all birds and mammals. A design that has been so effective that evolution has preserved it across hundreds of millions of years. Among the 4 chambers of the heart, the left ventricle bears the greatest workload. It is the chamber responsible for pumping oxygenated blood out through the aorta and into the systemic circulation. The vast network of arteries, capillaries, and veins that supplies the entire body. Because the systemic circulation is so extensive and requires blood to be delivered at relatively high pressure, the left ventricle must generate considerably more force than the right ventricle, which only needs to pump blood the short distance to the lungs. This greater workload is reflected in the anatomy. The wall of the left ventricle is approximately 3 times thicker than the wall of the right ventricle. The left ventricle is the engine within the engine, the most muscular, most forceful, most central piece of the heart's pumping apparatus. When physicians measure blood pressure, they are measuring the pressure generated by the left ventricle's contraction. The familiar 2 numbers of a blood pressure reading, systolic and diastolic, reflect the peak and resting pressures of the left ventricle's powerful rhythmic work. Despite the common image of the heart as centered in the chest, the heart actually sits slightly to the left of the midline. The heart is roughly centered, but it is tilted. Its apex, the pointed lower tip, angles toward the lower left. This is why we feel our heartbeat most strongly on the left side of the chest. The heart is situated in a region of the chest called the mediastinum, the central compartment of the thorax between the lungs. It rests on the diaphragm, the dome-shaped breathing muscle, and is enclosed in a protective double-layered sac called the pericardium, which holds a small amount of fluid to lubricate the heart's movements as it beats. The slight leftward lean of the heart, the apex pointing toward the lower left, means that when a doctor places a stethoscope to listen to the heartbeat, they listen at a point between the 5th and 6th ribs, slightly left of center, the left side of the chest, the place where, since ancient times, human beings have instinctively pressed a hand when speaking of love, of sincerity, of feeling. The human heart begins its lifelong work remarkably early in development. The heart starts forming during the 3rd week after fertilization, just 21 to 23 days into gestation, when the embryo is still only a few millimeters long. By around 22 days, the primitive heart tube begins to contract for the first time. By the end of the 4th week, when the embryo is still smaller than a pea, the heart is already beating in a recognizable rhythm, circulating blood through the developing embryo's first primitive vessels. At this point, the embryo has no arms, no legs, no recognizable face. But it has a beating heart. The first ultrasound detection of a fetal heartbeat typically occurs between 6 and 8 weeks of gestation, when the rhythmic flicker of the tiny heart can be seen on the screen. That flickering light on an ultrasound, that small, rapid, determined pulse, is often described by new parents as one of the most moving things they have ever seen. And it is remarkable. A new heart, just weeks old, already doing exactly what hearts do. The fetal heart beats at a pace very different from the adult resting rate. In the early weeks of development, the fetal heart rate can be as high as 160 to 180 beats per minute, nearly 3 times the typical adult resting rate. As the fetus grows and the heart matures, this rate gradually slows. By the time of birth, the newborn's heart is beating at approximately 120 to 160 beats per minute. Through childhood, the resting heart rate gradually decreases, reaching adult norms of 60 to 100 beats per minute by adolescence. This developmental slowing of the heart rate reflects the maturing efficiency of the cardiovascular system. A smaller, less developed heart must work faster to maintain adequate circulation. As the heart grows larger and stronger, each beat delivers more blood and fewer beats are needed. The heart, as it grows, learns to do more with each contraction, a quiet efficiency accumulating over years. One of the most remarkable features of the heart is that it generates its own electrical impulses. It does not depend on signals from the brain or nervous system to initiate each beat. The heart's electrical system is entirely self-contained, originating in specialized cells within the heart itself. This intrinsic electrical system consists of several components working in precise coordination. The impulse begins at the sinoatrial node, a small cluster of specialized cells in the right atrium, often called the heart's natural pacemaker. From there, it travels through specific conduction pathways to coordinate the contraction of all 4 chambers in the correct sequence. The fact that the heart can beat independently of the brain is dramatically demonstrated in heart transplant surgery. When a donor heart is removed from its original body and placed in a recipient, the transplanted heart, once connected to the new body's blood supply, will resume beating on its own, without any nerve connections to the new host's brain. The heart carries its rhythm with it. It does not borrow its beat from anywhere, it brings it. The sinoatrial node, commonly abbreviated as the SA node, is a small, crescent-shaped cluster of specialized cells located in the upper wall of the right atrium, near the point where the superior vena cava, the large vein returning blood from the upper body, enters the heart. It is approximately the size of a grain of rice. This tiny structure generates the electrical impulse that initiates each heartbeat. At rest, the SA node fires approximately 60 to 100 times per minute, setting the heart's resting rhythm. The SA node is sensitive to signals from the autonomic nervous system. It can speed up in response to adrenaline and stress, or slow down in response to relaxation and sleep. But even without these external signals, it keeps firing steadily on its own. The SA node is sometimes called the heart's conductor, the small, quiet originator of the electrical wave that sweeps through the heart with each beat, coordinating the contraction of millions of muscle cells into a single, unified, purposeful squeeze. The electrical activity generated by the heart as it beats spreads not only through the cardiac muscle, but outward through the body's tissues to the skin surface, where it can be detected by sensitive electrodes. This is the basis of the electrocardiogram, the ECG or EKG, one of the most important diagnostic tools in medicine. An ECG records the changing electrical potentials at the skin surface as the electrical wave of each heartbeat passes through the heart. The characteristic pattern, the familiar peaks and troughs of the ECG tracing, reflects the sequential electrical activation of the atria and ventricles, producing a distinctive waveform called the PQRT complex. Each component of this waveform has a name and a specific meaning. The P wave reflects atrial depolarization, the electrical activation of the atria. The QRS complex reflects ventricular depolarization, the activation of the ventricles. And the T wave reflects ventricular repolarization, the electrical recovery of the ventricular muscle. Changes in the shape, timing, or character of these waves can reveal information about the heart's health, rhythm, and function, making the ECG one of the most information-rich tests available to clinicians. One of the more subtle aspects of the heart's rhythm is its variation with breathing, called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. When you breathe in, your heart rate speeds up slightly. When you breathe out, it slows down slightly. This variation, in, fast, out, slow, occurs in healthy people of all ages, most pronounced in children and young adults. Respiratory sinus arrhythmia is a sign of a healthy autonomic nervous system. It reflects the heart's sensitivity to changes in intrathoracic pressure and to vagal, parasympathetic tone that varies with respiration. This means your breathing and your heartbeat are not independent. They are in conversation, each influencing the other in a continuous, rhythmic dialogue. When you slow your breathing, your heart rate also slows, and the variation between beats deepens. The slow exhale of a relaxed breath is a direct communication to your heart. Slow down. Rest. After the electrical impulse from the SA node spreads through the atria, it reaches a second structure called the atrioventricular node, the AV node, located between the atria and ventricles. Here, the impulse pauses briefly before continuing to the ventricles. This pause, lasting a fraction of a second, is critical. It gives the atria time to complete their contraction and push blood into the ventricles before they contract. Without this delay, the atria and ventricles would contract simultaneously, disrupting the coordinated filling and pumping sequence. The AV node acts as a gatekeeper and timing device, ensuring the heart's two-stage pumping action, fill, then eject, occurs in the correct sequence. It also serves as a safety net. If the SA node fails, the AV node can take over as pacemaker, firing at a slower rate of about 40 to 60 beats per minute, maintaining circulation until medical intervention is possible. From the AV node, the electrical impulse travels down specialized conduction pathways, the bundle of His and its branches, to a network of fibers called the Purkinje fibers, which spread throughout the inner walls of the ventricles. These fibers conduct electrical impulses very rapidly, ensuring that the entire ventricular muscle is activated almost simultaneously. This rapid, coordinated activation is essential for effective pumping. If the ventricular muscle contracted in a slow, wave-like progression from one end to the other, the pumping would be inefficient, parts of the muscle contracting before others had a chance to contribute. The Purkinje system ensures that the ventricles contract as a unified whole, generating maximum pressure and maximum ejection of blood with each beat. The electrical elegance of the cardiac conduction system, from the SA node's quiet initiation to the AV node's careful timing to the Purkinje fiber's rapid distribution, is a piece of biological engineering refined over hundreds of millions of years of evolution into something that works, every beat with extraordinary precision. At rest, the average adult heart pumps approximately 5 liters of blood per minute, roughly the entire blood volume of the body, through the circulatory system. This output, called the cardiac output, is the product of the heart rate, beats per minute, multiplied by the stroke volume, the amount of blood ejected with each beat. At a resting heart rate of about 70 beats per minute and a stroke volume of approximately 70 milliliters per beat, the cardiac output works out to roughly 5 liters per minute. In a vigorous athlete during intense exercise, cardiac output can increase to 20 to 25 liters per minute, 4 to 5 times the resting level, as both heart rate and stroke volume increase. Over the course of a lifetime, the heart pumps an almost incomprehensible volume of blood. By the age of 70, the heart will have pumped approximately 175 million liters of blood, enough to fill more than 70 Olympic swimming pools. With each contraction of the left ventricle at rest, approximately 70 milliliters of blood is ejected into the aorta. This volume is called the stroke volume, and it represents roughly 2/3 of the blood present in the ventricle at the end of filling. The remaining third stays behind, providing a reserve for moments when more output is needed. The stroke volume adjusts automatically to the demands placed on the heart. When more blood returns to the heart, as during exercise, when the muscles pump more blood back through the veins, the ventricle stretches more, and the subsequent contraction is stronger, ejecting more blood. This automatic relationship, greater stretch leading to greater force of contraction, is called the Frank-Starling mechanism, and it is one of the heart's primary ways of matching its output to the body's needs. 70 milliliters per beat, a small volume, less than a quarter cup, but at 100,000 beats per day, it adds up to an astonishing, continuous, lifelong river of circulation. The familiar lub-dub sound of the heartbeat, heard through a stethoscope, is produced by the closure of the heart's valves during each cardiac cycle. The first sound, the lub, S1, comes from the closing of the mitral and tricuspid valves at the start of ventricular contraction. The second sound, the dub, S2, comes from the closing of the aortic and pulmonary valves at the end of ventricular contraction. These sounds reflect the closure of valves, preventing the backflow of blood. Each lub and dub is a soft but clear signal that the sequence is proceeding correctly, that blood is moving in the right direction, and the valves are doing their job. There is something reassuring about the stethoscope, the act of listening to a heartbeat, hearing those two soft sounds in steady repetition, confirming the life within. Physicians have been doing it for 2 centuries, and it never entirely loses its gravity. The sound of a working heart. The heart has 4 valves: the mitral, tricuspid, aortic, and pulmonary, each a marvel of passive mechanical engineering. These valves open and close in response to pressure differences, requiring no active control. When pressure in front exceeds the pressure behind, the valve opens. When it reverses, the valve closes. The mitral valve, between the left atrium and ventricle, and the tricuspid valve, between the right atrium and ventricle, are atrioventricular valves, controlling flow between atria and ventricles. The aortic valve at the exit of the left ventricle, and the pulmonary valve at the exit of the right ventricle, are semilunar valves, controlling flow out of the ventricles. These 4 valves, opening and closing in sequence with each heartbeat, ensure blood flows in one direction only, atria to ventricles to arteries, without doubling back. They are the one-way gates of the circulatory system, passive but precise, operating billions of times over a lifetime without failure in a healthy heart. At rest, it takes approximately 1 minute for a red blood cell to complete a full circuit of the body, leaving the heart, traveling through the arteries, passing through the capillaries of the tissues, returning through the veins, passing through the lungs, and arriving back at the heart, ready to be pumped out again. During exercise, as cardiac output increases and circulation speeds up, this transit time shortens considerably. A rapidly circulating blood cell might complete the circuit in as little as 15 to 20 seconds during intense physical activity. The circulatory system is, in this sense, a continuous loop, an unbroken circuit of flow that has been running without interruption since the heart first began beating in the embryo. Every red blood cell completes this circuit hundreds of thousands of times over its approximately 120-day lifespan before it is retired and replaced by a new one. The loop goes on, quiet and continuous, cycle after cycle, day after day. Like every other organ in the body, the heart needs its own blood supply to function. The coronary arteries, 2 main arteries that branch off from the aorta just above the aortic valve, wrap around the surface of the heart, sending smaller branches into the heart muscle itself to deliver the oxygen and nutrients that cardiac muscle cells need to contract continuously. The word coronary comes from the Latin for crown, reflecting the way these arteries encircle the heart like a crown. They are the heart's own circulatory system, the pipes that keep the pump supplied. Interestingly, the coronary arteries fill primarily during diastole, the relaxation phase between contractions, because during systole, contraction, the squeezing of the heart muscle compresses the coronary vessels and restricts flow. The heart, in a sense, fills its own tank during the moments between beats, in the brief resting pause of each cardiac cycle. The average adult human body contains about 4 to 6 litres of blood, roughly 5 litres for a typical adult. This represents about 7 to 8% of body weight. Blood is a complex tissue composed of plasma and cellular components, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Plasma, the liquid part, makes up about 55% of blood volume and consists mainly of water with dissolved proteins, nutrients, hormones, waste products, and electrolytes. Red blood cells make up about 45%, with white blood cells and platelets together accounting for less than 1%. This small volume, 5 litres, circulates through the body's approximately 100,000 kilometres of blood vessels. It is the river of the body, carrying what cells need and removing what they produce. The oxygen-carrying function of blood is performed by red blood cells, packed with a protein called hemoglobin. Each hemoglobin molecule contains 4 iron atoms, each able to bind 1 oxygen molecule. When blood passes through the lungs, hemoglobin loads with oxygen. In the tissues, it releases that oxygen to the cells that need it. Red blood cells are adapted for this role. They have no nucleus, allowing them to be filled with hemoglobin, maximizing their oxygen carrying capacity. Their biconcave shape gives them a large surface area, enabling rapid oxygen exchange. An adult human body contains about 25 trillion red blood cells, the most numerous cell type. Each lives around 120 days before being broken down in the spleen and liver, its iron recycled. The body produces about 2 million new red blood cells every second, a continuous renewal in the marrow of your bones. The aorta, the artery that carries oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the body, is the largest blood vessel. The ascending aorta, just above the heart, has a diameter of about 2.5 to 3.5 centimeters. It arches over the heart, descends through the chest, and continues through the abdomen, before dividing into the iliac arteries that supply the legs. The aortic wall is designed to handle high pressure. It contains thick layers of muscle and elastic fibers that allow it to expand with each heartbeat and then recoil, helping smooth the pulsatile flow into a more continuous flow in smaller vessels. This elastic recoil, its expansion and recovery with each pulse, is what you feel at your wrist or neck, the wave of pressure traveling from the heart with each beat. That is the pulse. At the far end of the arterial system, the delivery end of the circulation, lies the capillary network, the finest and most intimate part of the circulatory system. Capillaries are so narrow that red blood cells must squeeze through them single file, often bending and deforming slightly to fit. The diameter of a typical capillary is approximately 5 to 10 micrometers, roughly the diameter of a single red blood cell, or about 1/10 the width of a human hair. Despite their extreme fineness, capillaries are so numerous and so densely distributed that no cell in the body is more than about 100 micrometers from the nearest capillary. It is at the capillaries that the real work of circulation happens. The exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, nutrients and waste products between the blood and the surrounding tissue cells. All the elaborate machinery of the heart and the great vessels exists to drive blood to these finest, quietest points of contact, where the blood and the cells of the body meet face to face, in the most intimate possible exchange. After blood has passed through the capillaries and given up its oxygen to the tissues, it collects into small venules and then larger veins for the return journey to the heart. Unlike arteries, which carry blood under the high pressure generated by the heart's pumping, veins operate under relatively low pressure. The pressure energy of the original heartbeat has been largely dissipated in passing through the resistance of the capillary network. To prevent blood from pooling in the veins under the influence of gravity, particularly in the legs, veins contain one-way valves that allow blood to flow toward the heart, but close to prevent backflow. The squeezing of the surrounding skeletal muscles during movement also helps push blood through the veins, which is one reason why regular movement is important for venous circulation. The veins, quieter and less dramatic than the arteries, are the return path, the long, low-pressure journey home. Their thin walls, their passive valves, their reliance on the help of surrounding muscles. They are the humble counterpart to the arteries, doing their essential work with minimal fuss, completing the circuit, bringing the blood back to begin again. For most of recorded history, the heart was seen not just as a physical organ, but as the center of the self, the seat of the soul, emotion, thought, and moral life. This view was shared across ancient cultures and shaped medicine, philosophy, and religion for millennia. In ancient Egypt, the heart held a central place in beliefs about death and the afterlife. In the weighing of the heart, described in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. A heart heavy with sin would be devoured by Amit, while a pure heart would pass into paradise. The Egyptians preserved most organs in canopic jars, but left the heart inside the body, too important to remove. This reverence for the heart as the center of the self, not merely a pump, but where a person truly lives, remains in language and culture, long after science placed consciousness in the brain. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle placed the heart at the center of emotion and cognition. In his view, the heart was the primary organ of the soul, the seat of intelligence and feeling, and the origin of sensation. Aristotle observed that the heart is the first organ to develop in the embryo, that it is the last to stop functioning at death, and that it responds to emotions, quickening with fear or excitement, slowing with calm. From this, he concluded that the heart must be the organ of thought and sensation. He assigned the brain a cooling function, believing it served to cool the heat produced by the heart. This view persisted in Western medicine for centuries, even as other traditions identified the brain as the seat of thought. The Aristotelian view of the heart shaped Western culture so deeply that its echoes remain in language, in heartfelt, heartbroken, and every expression that treats the heart as the center of inner life. For most of European medical history, from the ancient Greeks through the medieval period and into the early modern era, blood was believed to be continuously produced in the liver and consumed by the body, flowing outward in a one-way movement rather than circulating. This view was overturned in 1628 when William Harvey published De Motu Cordis, On the Motion of the Heart and Blood. demonstrating through observation and quantitative reasoning that blood circulates in a closed loop driven by the heart. Harvey calculated that the amount of blood pumped by the heart each hour far exceeded the body's total blood volume, making continuous production impossible. The blood must therefore circulate. The heart pumps it out, arteries carry it, veins return it, and the heart pumps it again. This insight required a complete rethinking of the body's internal mechanics and marked the beginning of modern cardiovascular science. On the 3rd of December 1967 in Cape Town, South Africa, the South African cardiac surgeon Christiaan Barnard performed the first successful human-to-human heart transplant, replacing the failing heart of 53-year-old Louise Washkansky with the heart of a young woman who had died in a car accident. Washkansky survived for 18 days after the operation before dying of pneumonia due to immune suppression drugs used to prevent rejection. The surgery itself was a success and opened the modern era of heart transplantation. In the decades since, heart transplantation has become an established but demanding procedure. The main limitation is not surgical technique, but donor availability and long-term immune rejection management. Around 3,500 to 4,000 heart transplants are performed worldwide each year, with 1-year survival rates above 85% and many recipients living more than 20 years. The first heart transplant was a watershed moment in medicine, showing that the heart, long seen as the symbolic center of the person, could be replaced and life could continue. Before the invention of the stethoscope, physicians listened to heart sounds by placing their ear directly on the patient's chest, an intimate and not always practical method. In 1816, the French physician René Laennec, examining a patient whose chest sounds were difficult to hear directly, rolled up paper into a tube and discovered the sounds were transmitted clearly. From this experiment, Laennec developed the first stethoscope, initially a hollow wooden tube, later refined into the binaural version with 2 earpieces still used today in updated form. The stethoscope transformed cardiac diagnosis. Physicians could now listen systematically to the heart, hearing the normal lub-dub, detecting murmurs of valve disease, and identifying irregular rhythms. Sounds that were always present became medically interpretable. The stethoscope became an iconic symbol of medicine, a simple device that made the inner sounds of the living body accessible to the listening ear. The heart's automaticity, its ability to generate its own electrical impulses, means that a removed heart can continue beating for a time outside the body if supplied with oxygen and nutrients. In transplant surgery, the donor heart is removed, then quickly cooled and preserved in a solution to maintain viability. Under these conditions, it can resume beating when reconnected to blood flow in the recipient. This independent rhythm is also visible in embryology. Cardiac cells grown in laboratory culture spontaneously begin to beat without any nervous system input. Individual cells in a dish pulse rhythmically, and when connected, they synchronize with each other. The heart generates its own rhythm, a biological fact rather than a metaphor. Over a lifetime, the heart performs more mechanical work than any other muscle in the body. It contracts without rest every second of every day, an endurance performance no skeletal muscle can match for long. To resist fatigue, cardiac muscle cells are highly adapted. They contain a high density of mitochondria, the energy-producing structures in cells, far more than most other cell types. About 30 to 35% of a cardiac muscle cell's volume is mitochondria, compared to about 2% in typical skeletal muscle cells. This supports continuous energy production without fatigue buildup. The heart relies almost entirely on aerobic metabolism, energy production using oxygen. Unlike skeletal muscles, which can switch to anaerobic metabolism during intense activity, the heart depends on oxygen almost continuously. Without sufficient blood flow, cardiac cells can only maintain function for a very short time. The cumulative mechanical work performed by the heart over a lifetime is remarkable. Each day, the heart generates enough energy to drive an average car approximately 20 miles. Over a 70-year lifetime, this cumulative energy output is equivalent to driving approximately 500,000 miles, roughly 20 times the circumference of the Earth. This is the work of a muscle weighing less than 350 grams, sustained without rest for an entire lifetime, fueled by the blood flowing through the coronary arteries, maintained by a system of repair and renewal operating continuously at the cellular level. When we think of remarkable physical feats, marathons, mountain climbs, records broken and limits exceeded, the most sustained, most complete, most unresting physical performance in every human life is never entered in a record book. It beats quietly in the chest, unremarked, doing its work. On average, women have slightly higher resting heart rates than men, typically by about 2 to 7 beats per minute. The average resting heart rate for adult women is approximately 70 to 80 beats per minute, while for men it is approximately 65 to 75 beats per minute. This difference is related partly to the smaller average size of the female heart, which has a somewhat lower stroke volume than the male heart, and therefore compensates by beating slightly faster to achieve similar cardiac output. The female heart also tends to be slightly smaller in absolute terms, even after accounting for body size differences. These are population averages, and individual variation is enormous. A highly trained female athlete may have a resting heart rate in the low 40s. A sedentary older man may have a resting rate above 80. Heart rate is one of the most variable of physiological measurements, shaped by fitness, age, stress, medications, temperature, and countless other factors. And no single number describes any individual heart. The heart contains approximately 40,000 neurons, nerve cells of the type normally associated with the brain and nervous system. These intrinsic cardiac neurons form a complex network, sometimes called the heart brain, or the little brain of the heart, and they play a role in coordinating and regulating the heart's activity that goes beyond simple electrical conduction. These neurons can sense changes in rate, rhythm, and pressure within the heart, process this information locally, and influence cardiac function, all without the information needing to travel to and from the brain. The heart, in this sense, has a degree of local intelligence, the ability to monitor and respond to its own conditions independently. Research in the field of neurocardiology has found that the heart communicates with the brain in ways that influence emotional processing, perception, and even cognition. The signals traveling from the heart to the brain outnumber the signals traveling from brain to heart. The relationship between heart and brain is not one-directional. It is a genuine, two-way conversation. Regular aerobic exercise is one of the most powerful ways to improve the heart's long-term health and efficiency. With consistent training, The heart undergoes adaptations, the athlete's heart, that allow it to do the same work with less effort. In response to endurance exercise, the heart's chambers, particularly the left ventricle, enlarge, allowing them to fill with more blood. The heart muscle becomes stronger, able to generate more force with each contraction. Stroke volume increases, meaning more blood is ejected per beat. As a result, resting heart rate decreases. A trained heart needs fewer beats per minute to maintain cardiac output. Elite endurance athletes, marathon runners, cyclists, rowers, can have resting heart rates as low as 28 to 40 beats per minute. The footballer Ronaldinho reportedly had a resting heart rate of 28 beats per minute. Each beat of a trained heart does more work than that of a sedentary one, the heart growing stronger in response to demand. The association between the heart and emotion, heartbreak, heartfelt, heartwarming, has a physiological basis. Emotions affect heart rate, rhythm, and blood pressure through the autonomic nervous system and stress hormones. Fear and acute stress activate the sympathetic nervous system, increasing heart rate, contraction force, and blood pressure, the fight or flight response. Calm and positive connection activate the parasympathetic system, slowing the heart and lowering blood pressure. Grief can, in rare cases, cause Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, or broken heart syndrome, a temporary weakening of the left ventricle triggered by stress hormones after emotional shock. The language of the heart is not purely metaphorical. The heart responds to emotional life through measurable physiology. Research has found that the heart rate and other cardiovascular measures respond to musical tempo and rhythm, synchronizing with the pulse of the music in a phenomenon related to what musicians call entrainment. Fast tempo music tends to increase heart rate. Slow, calm music tends to decrease it. Slow, regular musical rhythms, particularly music with tempos around 60 beats per minute, which approximates a relaxed resting heart rate, have been shown in studies to reduce heart rate, lower blood pressure, and decrease physiological markers of stress. This is one reason why slow, regular music is effective as a relaxation and sleep aid. There is something ancient and deep about the relationship between rhythm and the heart, the beating of a drum, the pulse of music, the rhythms of dance. These may resonate with us, partly because they speak to something fundamental in our physiology, the rhythm at our center, the beat that has been with us since before birth. A heart murmur is an extra or unusual sound heard between the normal lub and dub of the heartbeat through a stethoscope. It is caused by turbulent blood flow within the heart, either through a narrowed or leaky valve, through an abnormal opening between chambers, or sometimes simply through normal blood flow in a structurally normal heart, called an innocent or functional murmur. Innocent heart murmurs, extra sounds with no structural cause, are extremely common, particularly in children and young adults. It is estimated that up to 80% of children have a detectable innocent murmur at some point during childhood. These murmurs are not associated with any heart abnormality and typically disappear or become inaudible as the child grows. Even in adults, the detection of a murmur does not necessarily indicate heart disease. Many murmurs are entirely benign. When a murmur does indicate an underlying valve condition or structural abnormality, it can be evaluated further with echocardiography, ultrasound imaging of the heart, to determine whether treatment is needed. Of the heart's 4 valves, the mitral valve, positioned between the left atrium and the left ventricle, is the most frequently affected by disease. Mitral valve prolapse, in which the valve's leaflets bulge slightly back into the left atrium during contraction, is the most common heart valve abnormality in developed countries, affecting approximately 2 to 3% of the population. Most cases of mitral valve prolapse are benign, causing a distinctive click sound on auscultation, perhaps associated with mild mitral regurgitation, leakage, but not leading to significant problems or requiring treatment. In a small percentage of cases, however, significant mitral regurgitation develops and may eventually require surgical repair or replacement. Heart valve surgery has advanced considerably in recent decades, and many valve abnormalities that once required open heart surgery can now be repaired using minimally invasive or even catheter-based techniques, reducing the recovery time and risk associated with treatment. In addition to the normal S1 and S2 heart sounds, physicians sometimes detect additional sounds, a third heart sound, S3, or a fourth, S4, that can provide important diagnostic information. These extra sounds are produced by the filling of the ventricles with blood and are normally inaudible in healthy adults. An S3 sound, a low, soft sound shortly after S2, can be a normal finding in young people or pregnant women, but in older adults it is often associated with heart failure or a dilated, weakened ventricle. An S4 sound, heard just before S1, typically indicates a stiffened or thickened ventricle that requires higher pressure to fill. The ability to detect these subtle sounds, to distinguish the normal 2-beat rhythm from the abnormal 3-beat gallop rhythm of an extra sound, requires a trained ear, a quiet room, and a stethoscope. It is one of the oldest diagnostic arts in medicine, dependent entirely on careful, attentive listening. Surrounding the heart is a fibrous sac called the pericardium, a double-layered structure whose inner layer is attached to the heart and whose outer layer connects to nearby structures. Between them is the pericardial cavity, containing about 15 to 50 milliliters of fluid. This fluid reduces friction as the heart beats, allowing smooth movement without chafing. The outer pericardium also limits sudden overexpansion, acting as a mechanical constraint on the heart. Inflammation of the pericardium, pericarditis, often causes sharp chest pain and is frequently linked to viral infection. In some cases, excess fluid, pericardial effusion, can accumulate and compress the heart, reducing its ability to fill and pump. The heart's rate is continuously modulated by the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary functions. The sympathetic branch speeds it up, and the parasympathetic branch slows it down. The main parasympathetic supply comes through the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve, also serving the lungs and gut. When active, it releases acetylcholine at the SA node, reducing the firing rate and slowing the heart. The vagus nerve is why relaxation responses, slow breathing, meditation, cold water on the face, slow the heart. Each slow exhale activates the vagal brake. Slow down, rest, there is no emergency. Research suggests laughter has beneficial effects on cardiovascular function. A full laugh activates breathing muscles, briefly increases heart rate and respiration, then leads to relaxation and a mild drop in heart rate and blood pressure, similar to mild exercise. Studies at the University of Maryland found that people who laughed more had better endothelial function, improved blood vessel dilation, than those exposed to stress. Other research links positive emotions, including laughter, with lower cardiovascular risk. The effects may involve reduced stress hormones, improved vascular function, and decreased chronic stress activation. Laughter appears to benefit the heart. A substantial body of research finds that regular meditation and mindfulness are associated with cardiovascular benefits. Lower resting heart rate, lower blood pressure, reduced sympathetic nervous system activity, and improved heart rate variability. Heart rate variability, the natural variation between heartbeats, is a marker of autonomic nervous system function and cardiovascular health. Higher variability is generally linked to better stress resilience and overall well-being. Meditation has been shown to increase it. The mechanism is that meditation activates the parasympathetic system and reduces sympathetic tone. The vagal brake is engaged, the heart slows, and beat-to-beat variability increases, producing a state of physiological calm that reflects mental calm. The state of social relationships has measurable effects on cardiovascular health. Strong social connections, friendships, and belonging are associated with lower resting heart rate, lower blood pressure, and reduced cardiovascular disease risk compared to chronic loneliness or isolation. Chronic loneliness activates the stress systems, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and the sympathetic nervous system, in a sustained way that can affect heart health over time. Social experience is therefore reflected in cardiovascular physiology. Moments of genuine connection, hugs, conversations, reunions, are linked to parasympathetic activation and oxytocin release, which may influence cardiac function. The heart responds to social connection not only metaphorically, but through measurable physiological pathways. The range of heart rates across the animal kingdom shows the relationship between body size, metabolic rate, and cardiac function. In general, smaller animals have faster heart rates, and larger animals have slower ones, as the heart must beat faster to circulate blood through a smaller body. The shrew has a resting heart rate of about 1,000 beats per minute. So fast, it approaches continuous vibration. The blue whale has a resting heart rate of about 4 to 8 beats per minute, with each massive contraction taking several seconds. The hummingbird has a heart rate of about 1,200 beats per minute during flight, dropping to around 50 during nighttime torpor to conserve energy. From shrew to blue whale, the heart shows an enormous range of biological adaptation. The heart of the blue whale, the largest animal ever known, reaching up to 30 meters and about 200 tons, is itself remarkable. It weighs around 180 kilograms and is roughly the size of a small car. Its aorta is wide enough for a human to pass through. In 2019, researchers at the Royal Ontario Museum in Canada preserved and mounted a blue whale heart, the first of its kind, after the animal washed ashore. The mounted heart stands about 5 feet tall, illustrating the scale of cardiovascular structure in the largest living animal. Each beat circulates hundreds of liters of blood through its enormous body. With only 4 to 8 beats per minute, each contraction moves a volume far greater than a human heart can pump in several minutes. The maximum heart rate, the fastest the heart can beat, is approximately 220 beats per minute in young adults, decreasing by roughly 1 beat per minute per year with age. Estimated maximum heart rate equals 220 minus age. During maximal exercise in a young, healthy person, the heart rate can approach this theoretical maximum. At 220 beats per minute, The cardiac cycle, the entire sequence of filling and contracting, is compressed into less than 1/3 of a second. The time available for the ventricles to fill with blood is dramatically shortened, and the duration of diastole, the relaxation and filling phase, shrinks to a fraction of its resting value. This is one of the limiting factors on maximum heart rate and cardiac output during extreme exercise. In practice, most people exercise at well below their theoretical maximum heart rate. A moderate exercise pace, a brisk walk, a gentle jog, might bring the heart rate to 100 to 130 beats per minute. A vigorous workout might reach 150 to 170. The cardiac reserve, the difference between resting and maximum, is the physiological space within which the heart adapts to varying demands. In a healthy heart, the electrical impulse generated by the SA node travels through the atria, across the AV node, and down through the ventricles in a precise, timed sequence. In some conditions, this conduction can be interrupted, a situation called a heart block. There are different degrees of heart block, ranging from first-degree block, a simple slowing of conduction through the AV node causing no symptoms, to complete third-degree heart block, in which no impulses from the atria reach the ventricles at all. In complete heart block, the ventricles rely on their own slow intrinsic rhythm, the escape rhythm, of approximately 30 to 40 beats per minute, which is often too slow to maintain adequate circulation. Complete heart block is one of the primary indications for the implantation of an artificial pacemaker, an electronic device that delivers timed electrical impulses to the heart, replacing the function of the disrupted conduction system. The first implantable pacemaker was placed in a patient in 1958. Today, approximately 1 million pacemakers are implanted worldwide each year. The development of mechanical devices capable of replacing or assisting the failing human heart is one of modern medicine's most extraordinary achievements. Ventricular assist devices, VADs, mechanical pumps implanted in or attached to the heart, can support or replace ventricular function in severe heart failure. The total artificial heart, which fully replaces the native heart, has existed in various forms since the 1980s. It is mainly used as a bridge to transplantation, sustaining patients while they await a donor heart, though longer-term use is being developed. The idea of a mechanical heart replacing the organ long central to human identity raises philosophical and ethical questions about the self. Where does identity reside when the heart is replaced by a mechanical pump? The question may be unanswerable, but the devices function, and people live because of them. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, is a technique for manually maintaining circulation and oxygenation when the heart has stopped. By compressing the chest rhythmically on the lower sternum, a rescuer can push blood through the circulation and maintain a minimal supply of oxygen to vital organs. The goal of CPR is not to restart the heart, but to buy time until a defibrillator can restore normal rhythm or emergency services arrive. The recommended compression rate, about 100 to 120 per minute, is close to a normal heart rate and to the tempo of the Bee Gees' Stayin' Alive, sometimes used as a mnemonic for correct rhythm. Echocardiography, cardiac ultrasound, is a widely used diagnostic tool in cardiology. It uses high-frequency sound waves directed at the heart, with returning echoes forming real-time images of the heart's chambers, walls, and valves, including their motion and blood flow. It can measure chamber size and function, assess valve opening and closing, detect abnormal flow, suggesting valve disease, and evaluate heart wall motion to identify damage from prior heart attacks. Unlike X-rays or CT scans, it does not use ionizing radiation, making it safe for repeated use in all patients, including pregnancy, and it can be performed at the bedside. The ultrasound probe placed on the chest offers a direct, real-time view of the beating heart, a unique diagnostic window into the body. Many cardiac surgical procedures, including coronary artery bypass grafting, valve repair and replacement, and correction of congenital heart defects, require operating on a stopped heart inside the open chest. To achieve this, the patient is placed on a heart-lung machine, cardiopulmonary bypass, which temporarily takes over the function of the heart and lungs. The heart is stopped using a cold, high-potassium solution called cardioplegia, which halts electrical activity and protects cardiac muscle. The body is often cooled to reduce metabolic demand. The machine oxygenates and circulates the blood, maintaining perfusion to vital organs while the surgeon works on the still heart. After the operation, the solution is removed, the body is rewarmed, and the heart, sometimes spontaneously, sometimes with a brief electrical shock, resumes beating. The moment the heart starts again after repair is complete is often described by surgeons as never losing its impact, no matter how many times it is seen. Despite major advances in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention, cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death worldwide. The World Health Organization estimates it causes around 17.9 million deaths per year, or about 32% of global deaths. The most common form is coronary artery disease, where fatty plaques narrow the arteries supplying the heart. A heart attack occurs when a plaque ruptures and a clot blocks blood flow to heart muscle. Major risk factors include high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoking, diabetes, obesity, inactivity, and poor diet, many of which are modifiable. Over the past decades, falling death rates in many countries reflect better treatment, prevention, and reduced smoking. When a coronary artery becomes blocked and blood flow to part of the heart muscle is interrupted, a myocardial infarction or heart attack, the muscle cells begin to die within minutes. If flow is not restored promptly, the damage becomes permanent scar tissue, which does not contract but allows the remaining heart muscle to adapt and compensate. Modern treatment focuses on restoring blood flow quickly through clot-dissolving drugs or procedures like angioplasty and stenting, which reduces damage and improves outcomes. Time is muscle is a key principle, since every minute of reduced flow increases muscle death. After a heart attack, the surviving heart muscle can adapt. Other arteries can enlarge. Remaining muscle can strengthen its contraction, and rehabilitation exercise can improve function and quality of life. For many years, the heart was considered an organ with no capacity for self-renewal. Cardiac muscle cells, once lost, were gone forever. This view has been revised with the discovery that the adult heart contains a small population of cardiac stem cells capable of generating new cardiomyocytes under some circumstances. The rate of cardiac regeneration in the adult human heart is very low, about 1% of cardiomyocytes per year. But it does exist, meaning that over a lifetime, a significant fraction of heart cells are replaced, even if repair after injury is limited. Research into increasing the heart's regenerative capacity through stem cell therapy, growth factors, or drugs that activate stem cells, is an active field with clinical promise. When the body is exposed to high altitude, where the oxygen in the air is lower, the cardiovascular system adapts to maintain oxygen delivery. In the short term, the heart rate increases and breathing becomes deeper and faster. Over weeks, longer-term changes occur. The kidneys increase production of erythropoietin, EPO, stimulating more red blood cells and raising oxygen-carrying capacity. The heart then gradually adjusts as the improved blood composition compensates for low oxygen levels. People living permanently at high altitude, in the Andes or Tibetan Plateau, develop cardiovascular adaptations to low oxygen conditions. Pregnancy places extraordinary demands on the cardiovascular system. By the third trimester, blood volume has increased by approximately 40 to 50%, cardiac output by 30 to 50%, and heart rate by 10 to 20 beats per minute. The heart must work harder to supply both the mother's tissues and the developing placenta and fetus. These changes begin early in pregnancy and are established by the second trimester. The heart undergoes structural changes. The left ventricle enlarges and its wall thickens, and overall, heart size increases. After delivery, these changes gradually resolve as cardiovascular demands return to normal. In healthy women, the heart's response to pregnancy demonstrates its adaptive capacity, increasing output and restructuring in response to changing needs. During sleep, the parasympathetic nervous system dominates, slowing the heart rate by 10 to 30 beats per minute compared to waking rest. In deep, slow-wave sleep, the heart rate reaches its daily minimum and blood pressure is lowest. This nightly reduction, the dipping pattern, supports cardiovascular health. People whose heart rate and blood pressure do not fall adequately, non-dippers, have higher rates of heart problems. Sleep's reduction of cardiac workload is restorative. As you lie still and breathe slows, your heart is already easing. The parasympathetic system and vagus nerve gently guide the SA node toward the slower rhythm of sleep. The familiar heart shape, the symmetrical, pointed at the bottom silhouette, seen on Valentine's cards and emoji keyboards, bears little resemblance to the human heart. Its origin is debated, with theories linking it to ivy leaves, the silphium seed pod, a plant used in ancient contraception, anatomical sketches viewed from below, or evolving artistic convention. The heart symbol appears in European art from at least the 13th century, associated with love and devotion in religious iconography. By the 15th century, it was present in secular love poetry and art, and by the Renaissance, it was established as a symbol of romantic love. This symbol is a widely recognized form of visual communication, understood across cultures and languages as representing love and emotion. In virtually every literary tradition and every language, the heart appears in poetry as the site of feeling, of love and grief, courage and fear, longing and joy. From the love poems of ancient Egypt and the psalms of ancient Israel, to the ghazals of Hafez and the sonnets of Shakespeare, to the haiku of Basho and the blues lyrics of 20th century America, the heart is the organ of feeling in the human imagination. This universality reflects something genuine in human experience. The heart does respond to emotion, in the tightening of anxiety, in the warmth of love, in the ache of loss. Whatever the philosophical truth about where consciousness lives, the physical sensations of emotional life are frequently located in the chest, in the region of the heart. Poetry reaches for the heart because the heart is where we feel the most important things, not in the detached, analytical way of cognition, but in the immediate, bodily way of lived experience. The heart, in poetry as in life, is where things matter. The word cardiac, and many medical terms relating to the heart, derives from the ancient Greek word cardia, meaning heart. This root appears in cardiology, cardiomegaly, cardiovascular, and many related terms. The word for heart in many European languages traces back to the Proto-Indo-European root *kurd, and to the Latin cor, meaning heart, which also gave rise to words like cordial, originally of the heart, courage, from Old French cœur, and record, from Latin recordare, to bring back to heart, meaning to remember. Language often returns to the heart as a symbol of deep meaning. From the earliest medical papyri of ancient Egypt, which noted the connection between the pulse and the heart, through Galen's anatomical descriptions in the 2nd century CE, through Harvey's discovery of circulation in the 17th century, to modern cardiac imaging and molecular cardiology, the heart has been one of the most studied organs in medicine. Each era introduced new tools and understanding. The stethoscope revealed heart sounds. The ECG revealed electrical activity. Cardiac catheterization enabled measurement of pressures and flows. Coronary angiography mapped the coronary arteries. Echocardiography showed structure and motion in real time. Genetic analysis revealed the molecular basis of hereditary cardiac conditions. Despite more than 2,000 years of study, cardiac science continues to produce new discoveries, new mechanisms, risk factors, treatments, and understanding of an organ that, in its simplest description, is a pump. Across many cultures and languages, courage, the willingness to face fear, danger, or hardship, is associated with the heart. The English word courage derives, through French, from the Latin cor, heart. To have courage is, in the original sense, to have heart. This association is not arbitrary. In moments of fear or danger, the heart responds immediately and unmistakably, racing and pounding. The physical experience of fear is closely tied to a racing heart, and acting despite fear has been understood across cultures as a quality of the heart. Take heart, we say, to encourage someone. Lose heart, when someone gives up. Faint-hearted, for someone afraid. Stout-hearted, for someone brave. The language of courage has long been the language of the heart. The relationship between sleep and cardiovascular health is bidirectional. Adequate sleep, generally 7 to 9 hours per night for adults, is associated with lower rates of high blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, better glucose regulation, and healthier inflammation levels. Poor sleep is associated with increased cardiovascular risk. During healthy sleep, blood pressure and heart rate follow a natural nocturnal decline, the dipping pattern, giving the cardiovascular system a reduced workload. People who consistently sleep less than 6 hours per night have higher rates of cardiovascular disease than those who sleep 7 to 8 hours. The cardiovascular system uses sleep for maintenance, lowering inflammatory markers, reducing cortisol levels, allowing blood pressure to fall, and giving the heart a slower rhythm. Sleep is an active restoration for the heart. Obstructive sleep apnea, a common sleep disorder in which the upper airway repeatedly collapses during sleep, causing brief interruptions in breathing, places significant strain on the cardiovascular system. Each apneic episode is followed by a brief arousal, a surge in sympathetic nervous system activity, a spike in heart rate and blood pressure, and a temporary drop in blood oxygen levels. When this pattern repeats dozens or hundreds of times per night, the cumulative cardiovascular stress is substantial. Sleep apnea is strongly associated with hypertension, atrial fibrillation, heart failure, and other cardiovascular conditions. Treatment of sleep apnea, typically with continuous positive airway pressure (CPAP) therapy, reduces this cardiovascular burden. The connection between the quality of sleep and the health of the heart is one of the more compelling arguments for taking sleep seriously, not as a luxury or an indulgence, but as a fundamental biological need with direct consequences for the organ that keeps everything going. Sleep is not a uniform state. It progresses through distinct stages: light non-REM sleep, deep slow-wave sleep, and REM rapid eye movement sleep, cycling approximately every 90 minutes. Each stage has a characteristic heart rate and blood pressure pattern. In light non-REM sleep, the heart rate decreases moderately from waking levels. In deep slow-wave sleep, the heart rate reaches its minimum and blood pressure is lowest, with strong parasympathetic dominance. In REM sleep, associated with vivid dreaming, the heart rate becomes more variable and can increase, sometimes approaching waking levels as sympathetic activity rises. The heart follows the structure of sleep, slowing in deep stages, becoming more variable in dreams, then settling again into the next cycle. The content of dreams can cause real, measurable changes in heart rate and other physiological measures. During intense or emotionally vivid dreams, whether frightening, exciting, or emotionally complex, the heart rate can increase significantly from the baseline REM sleep level. This physiological responsiveness to dream content reflects the genuine activation of emotional circuits in the dreaming brain. The brain, during vivid dreaming, does not entirely distinguish between dream events and real ones. The emotional responses it generates are, from the perspective of the autonomic nervous system, real enough to produce genuine cardiovascular changes. The racing heart upon waking from a nightmare, or the warm, elevated pulse upon waking from a beautiful dream, is the heart's honest response to the emotional reality of the night's interior life. The heart does not know it was a dream. It was there the whole time, responding faithfully to the experiences of the sleeping mind. The transition from the activity and stimulation of the day to sleep is, for the cardiovascular system, a shift from higher to lower demand. Heart rate and blood pressure, elevated during the day, gradually descend toward the lower levels, appropriate for sleep. Practices that activate the parasympathetic nervous system: slow, deep breathing, gentle stretching, quiet reading, a warm bath, dim lighting, and slowing mental activity, support this transition. They signal to the nervous system that alertness is no longer needed and that the body can move toward rest. Right now, as breathing slows and muscles release tension, the parasympathetic nervous system is gradually gaining ground. The sympathetic system is standing down. The heart receives signals through the vagus nerve that rest is approaching. The heart is already easing into its nighttime rhythm. The electrical activity of the heart, the currents flowing through cardiac muscle with each beat, generates not only the electrical potentials measurable by the ECG, but also a magnetic field that extends outside the body. This cardiac magnetic field can be detected by an extremely sensitive instrument called a magnetocardiograph. which uses superconducting quantum interference devices, SQUIDs, to measure the tiny magnetic fluctuations produced by the beating heart. The heart's magnetic field is approximately 1/1,000,000th the strength of the Earth's magnetic field, extraordinarily weak by any external standard, but real and measurable. Magnetocardiography, MCG, can detect electrical abnormalities in the heart that are not visible on a standard ECG, and it is used in some specialized cardiac centers for the evaluation of complex arrhythmias and other conditions. The heart that beats in your chest is generating an electromagnetic field that extends faintly beyond the boundaries of your skin. The field is tiny and no one can feel it, but it is there, a small, rhythmic, electromagnetic presence, the physical signature of a living heart. Congenital heart defects, structural abnormalities of the heart present at birth, are the most common type of birth defect, occurring in approximately 8 out of every 1,000 live births. They range enormously in severity, from minor abnormalities requiring no treatment to complex structural defects, requiring multiple surgical procedures in the first years of life. The most common congenital heart defect is a ventricular septal defect, VSD, a hole in the wall between the two ventricles. Small VSDs often close on their own in infancy. Larger ones may require surgical or catheter-based closure. Advances in pediatric cardiac surgery over the past 50 years have been extraordinary. Conditions that were uniformly fatal in children in the 1950s and 1960s, including complex multi-chamber defects, can now be repaired with survival rates above 90% in experienced centers. The large majority of children born with congenital heart defects today will survive into adulthood, a quiet triumph of modern surgery and intensive care. While the human heart cannot safely stop for more than a few minutes without causing irreversible brain damage, some animals have evolved tolerance for cardiac arrest. The wood frog, a small North American species that overwinters in a state of deep freeze, can survive cardiac arrest, frozen solid beneath leaf litter for months, and then resume normal cardiac function when temperatures rise in spring. During freezing, the wood frog's heart stops, its blood ceases to flow, its tissues fill with ice crystals. Through cryoprotective adaptations, including high glucose concentrations in the blood that protect cell membranes and tolerance for cellular dehydration and ice formation, the frog survives. When it thaws, the heart resumes its beat, and the frog hops away as though nothing remarkable has happened. The wood frog's heart is a reminder of the extraordinary solutions to the challenge of maintaining circulation across the diversity of life. Heart rate variability, the natural beat-to-beat variation in the time between heartbeats, is a highly informative measure of cardiac function. A healthy heart does not beat with perfect regularity. Each interval varies slightly in a pattern reflecting the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system activity on the SA node. Higher heart rate variability is associated with better cardiovascular health, better fitness, better emotional regulation, lower stress and inflammation, and greater resilience. Lower heart rate variability is associated with higher cardiovascular risk, chronic stress, depression, and poorer outcomes in several conditions. Many wearable devices now track heart rate variability as an indicator of physiological resilience and recovery, offering insight into autonomic nervous system balance. Atrial fibrillation, a condition in which the electrical activity of the atria becomes chaotic and disorganized, causing them to quiver rather than contract effectively, is the most common sustained cardiac arrhythmia, affecting about 33 million people worldwide. In atrial fibrillation, the SA node's orderly initiation of each beat is replaced by hundreds of disorganized electrical wavelets in the atrial tissue. The AV node is bombarded by chaotic impulses and transmits them irregularly to the ventricles, producing the characteristic irregularly irregular pulse. Atrial fibrillation is associated with increased risk of stroke due to blood stagnation and clot formation in the atria, and increased risk of heart failure. Treatment includes rate control, rhythm control, and anticoagulation to reduce stroke risk. Despite its complexity and risks, many people with atrial fibrillation live active lives with appropriate treatment. The heart adapting to an imperfect electrical situation. For most of its scientific history, the heart was understood as a purely mechanical organ, a pump, nothing more. But in 1981, a discovery revised this view. The heart produces hormones. Cardiac muscle cells in the atria produce atrial natriuretic peptide, ANP, a hormone that acts on the kidneys to promote sodium and water excretion, reducing blood volume and blood pressure. ANP is released when the atria are stretched by increased blood volume or pressure, signaling the kidneys to reduce circulating volume. It is part of a hormonal feedback system, regulating blood pressure and fluid balance. Other cardiac hormones have since been identified, including brain natriuretic peptide, BNP, mainly produced by the ventricles despite its name, released in response to ventricular stress and used clinically as a marker for heart failure. The heart is not only a pump, but also an endocrine organ, communicating through hormonal signals. One of the most remarkable and rarely noted facts about the heart is that primary cardiac tumors, cancers originating in the heart muscle itself, are extraordinarily rare. The heart is essentially immune to primary cancer. The most common primary cardiac tumor is the myxoma, a benign tumor of connective tissue that accounts for approximately half of all primary cardiac tumors and occurs in roughly 1 in 500 people. True malignant primary cancers of the heart are vanishingly rare, estimated to occur in perhaps 2 in 10 million people. Why? The most likely reason is that cardiac muscle cells, unlike most other cell types in the body, are largely post-mitotic. They do not normally divide after birth. Cancer requires cell division to spread. Cells that do not divide are much less susceptible to the accumulated mutations that lead to cancer. The price of this cancer resistance is the limited regenerative capacity we discussed earlier. The heart can barely renew itself because its cells barely divide, and cells that do not divide cannot become cancerous. The heart's stillness, the paradoxical non-dividing nature of its cells, is both its vulnerability to permanent damage and its protection against malignancy. The history of cardiac pharmacology includes examples of medicines derived from natural sources. Digitalis, from the foxglove plant, Digitalis purpurea, was one of the first effective treatments for heart failure and atrial fibrillation. Its use was systematically described by the English physician William Withering in 1785, though it had been used in folk medicine earlier. Digoxin, the purified active compound from Digitalis, strengthens cardiac contraction and slows the ventricular rate in atrial fibrillation. It remains in clinical use today. Other cardiac medications have been derived from sources such as cone snail venom and the cinchona tree bark, quinidine, an antiarrhythmic, The chemistry of the natural world has provided important tools for treating heart disease. We mentioned earlier that the heart has a limited but real capacity for cellular renewal. Approximately 1% of cardiomyocytes replaced per year. This means that over a typical human lifetime, the heart undergoes substantial cellular turnover. By middle age, perhaps half or more of the cardiomyocytes were not present at birth. They are cells generated after birth as slow renewal continues year by year. This cellular renewal is separate from the growth of the heart in childhood. The increase in size and cell number from the fetal heart to the adult organ. Adult turnover is gentler and more gradual, a quiet maintenance rather than growth. The heart you were born with is, in a cellular sense, not entirely the same heart that beats today. It has been slowly renewing itself, replacing cells and adapting across decades. Research has found that cardiovascular events, including heart attacks and strokes, follow a seasonal pattern with higher incidence in winter months and lower incidence in summer. This pattern is observed across multiple countries and cannot be fully explained by cold weather effects on the coronary arteries alone. Proposed explanations include seasonal variations in physical activity, vitamin D levels, respiratory infections, which can trigger cardiovascular events, blood pressure, typically higher in winter, and coagulation factors. The pattern is most pronounced in elderly populations and in people with pre-existing cardiovascular disease. The heart appears sensitive to seasonal changes, temperature, daylight, infections, and activity levels, and is influenced by the rhythms of the year. Of all the organs in the human body, the heart is the first to become functional. It begins beating, circulating blood through the developing embryo's vessels, at approximately 3 to 4 weeks of development, before the brain, lungs, eyes, ears, or limbs have formed. This early function reflects developmental necessity. The embryo rapidly outgrows what diffusion alone can support, requiring an early circulatory system. The heart forms and begins pumping to meet this need. The heart's early activity ensures that, before consciousness or sensation develops, it is already sustaining the growing body. Over an average human lifespan, say 75 years, the heart beats approximately 2.5 billion times. This is an incomprehensibly large number for a single organ's activity. 2.5 billion individual contractions, each one an unremarked event in the continuity of life. Each of those beats was a small, complete act of faithfulness. Each one sustained the oxygenation of the brain that thought, the hands that worked, the eyes that saw, the ears that listened, the body that experienced everything a human life contains. No other act performed by the body is performed so many times, so consistently, so silently. The heart beats without expectation of recognition or gratitude. It simply does what it does, because that is what it is, the sustaining center of everything. Before we are born, in the warm, fluid darkness of the womb, the sounds we hear include the heartbeat of our mother, transmitted through the amniotic fluid. It is thought that the fetal auditory system is functional from approximately 24 weeks of gestation, and that, among the earliest auditory experiences of the developing fetus, is the rhythmic, regular sound of the maternal heartbeat. This early exposure may be one reason why the sound of a heartbeat, or a steady, rhythmic sound that approximates it, is deeply calming to infants and, perhaps, to adults. The heartbeat was the first sound of safety, the first indication of warmth and protection, experienced before memory, before language, before the self that would eventually form had any existence. The heartbeat is the original lullaby. The relationship between the heart and the immune system is more intimate than once recognized. The heart is not merely a passive recipient of immune activity, it also participates in immune regulation. Cardiac macrophages, immune cells resident within the heart, help monitor and maintain cardiac electrical conduction, clear cellular debris, and coordinate responses to injury. Inflammatory processes triggered by infection, autoimmune disease, or metabolic disease can directly affect the heart, leading to conditions such as myocarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle, and contributing to atherosclerosis, plaque buildup in coronary arteries. Conversely, injury to the heart can trigger immune responses that influence healing and recovery. The boundary between the cardiovascular and immune systems is more permeable than once thought. The heart is embedded in a broader biological network, communicating with and responding to other systems in the body. Research in positive psychology has found associations between gratitude, the practice of noticing and appreciating good things in one's life, and measurable markers of cardiovascular health. People who score higher on gratitude measures tend to have lower inflammatory markers, better sleep quality, lower blood pressure, and fewer symptoms of heart disease. Some studies have reported that patients with heart failure who practiced gratitude journaling for several weeks showed improvements in heart rate variability, inflammatory markers, and measures of cardiac function compared to control groups. I cannot confirm the specific details or institutions of these studies. The mechanism is likely related to the effects of positive emotional states on the autonomic nervous system. Gratitude activating the parasympathetic system, reducing chronic stress-related sympathetic activation, improving sleep, and lowering inflammatory tone. This is not a scientific fact. It is a reflection worth pausing on before we draw our journey toward its end. Every heartbeat is a small act of continuity, connecting the moment past to the moment ahead and sustaining the bridge between yesterday and tomorrow, between the person you were when you fell asleep and the person you will be when you wake. The heart does not know the day, year, or century, nor whether the person it sustains is happy or sad, young or old, near the beginning of life or its end. It simply beats, steadily and faithfully, holding the thread of a life from its earliest moments to its last. There is something reassuring in this simple biological faithfulness. Whatever is uncertain or difficult, the heart continues. It has continued through hard days, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt or grief or fear. It continues now, and likely will tomorrow. Across major religious traditions, the heart holds a central spiritual role. In Christianity, it is the seat of faith, love, and moral will, where God is encountered and character transformed. The Sacred Heart of Jesus is a key Catholic symbol. In Islam, the heart, qalb, is the center of spiritual awareness and moral consciousness, perceiving divine reality and subject to purification or hardening. In Sufism, it is the primary locus of divine presence. In Buddhism, the heart center is linked to compassion and loving kindness, cultivated in metta meditation. In Hinduism, the spiritual heart, Hridaya, is the center of self-awareness and the seat of the Atman, identified with universal consciousness. In these traditions, the heart is more than a biological organ. It is where the human and sacred meet, the deepest inner sanctum of the person. In intensive care, during cardiac surgery, or medical crises, one person's heart can be supported by others through CPR, machines during surgery, or a donated heart. In these moments, the boundary between lives becomes permeable. A donated heart, beating in a new chest, sustaining a new life, carries something of its original owner, though medicine cannot fully explain what. Many recipients feel a connection to the unknown donor, a gratitude felt in the chest, in a rhythm they did not choose, but now call their own. The heart, long seen as the seat of love, can, in remarkable cases, be literally transferable from one person to another. Between each contraction of the heart, in the brief diastolic interval when the ventricles fill and the cardiac muscle relaxes, there is a moment of rest. At a resting heart rate of 60 beats per minute, this rest lasts approximately half a second with each beat. Half a second does not seem like much, but at 100,000 beats per day, those half-second rests accumulate to approximately 14 hours of diastolic rest in every 24-hour day. The heart rests, in total, for more than half of its working time. Each small rest enabling the next contraction, each moment of relaxation essential to the next moment of force. This rhythm, work, rest, work, rest, work, rest, is the heart's fundamental pattern. Not continuous effort, but effort and release, contraction and relaxation, systole and diastole, in endless alternation. The rest is not a break from the work. The rest is part of the work. Without the diastolic pause, there is no systolic contraction. Without the rest, there is no beat. Perhaps there is a lesson in the heart's most basic rhythm. More scientific papers have been published on the heart and cardiovascular system than on any other organ or organ system in medicine. Cardiology is the largest medical specialty in many countries. The amount of knowledge accumulated about the heart, from the molecular biology of individual cardiac cells to the epidemiology of heart disease in populations of millions, is extraordinary. And yet, the heart continues to surprise. Every decade brings new discoveries, new mechanisms, new risk factors, new therapeutic targets, new understanding of the complex interplay between the heart, the brain, the immune system, the microbiome, and the social and emotional world of the person in whom the heart beats. The most studied organ in human medicine is also still one of the most mysterious. We understand much about how it works. We understand less about why it fails when it does, and why it endures as long as it does, and what makes one heart resilient where another is vulnerable. The heart, thoroughly studied for 2,000 years, is still full of questions. The heart is one of the warmest parts of the body, generating heat through continuous metabolic activity of its muscle cells. This comes from energy conversions in cardiac mitochondria, producing ATP from oxygen and nutrients. Blood entering and leaving the heart is slightly warmer than core body temperature. The heart helps regulate body heat alongside other warmth-generating organs, maintaining a core temperature around 37 degrees Celsius. The chest warmth felt during strong emotions has a real physiological basis: increased blood flow and metabolic activity in the thoracic region. The heart literally generates physical, biological warmth at the body's center. Remarkably, the heart's muscle has no conventional pain receptors. When damaged, as in a heart attack, pain is often referred to the chest, arm, jaw, or back via shared nerve pathways. This referred pain can make heart attacks hard to recognize, feeling like indigestion, a toothache, or an aching shoulder. The heart does not reveal its distress directly, yet this may protect us. If the heart signaled pain with every stress or ischemia, life would be intolerable. Its quiet endurance, suffering in silence until critical, is both its vulnerability and its gift. The maximum heart rate, the fastest the heart can beat, decreases with age, declining by approximately 1 beat per minute per year throughout adulthood. A 20-year-old may have a theoretical maximum heart rate of 200 beats per minute. A 70-year-old's maximum is closer to 150. Resting heart rate also tends to change with age, though the pattern is more complex. In healthy adults, resting heart rate may remain relatively stable or decrease slightly with maintained fitness, while in sedentary people, resting heart rate may increase or become more variable. Heart rate variability decreases with age. The natural beat-to-beat variation diminishes as the autonomic nervous system becomes less responsive. This age-related change in heart rate variability is associated with the general decline in autonomic flexibility that comes with aging. The aging heart does more work than it once did to maintain the same cardiac output. Its walls thicker, its valves sometimes less pliable, its coronary arteries sometimes narrowed, but it continues. The heart that has been beating for 70 or 80 years is an organ of extraordinary endurance. Worn, perhaps, but still working, still finding its rhythm, still beating. When a heart is transplanted from a donor into a recipient, the surgical procedure involves connecting the blood vessels, but not the nerves. A transplanted heart has no direct nervous connection to the recipient's brain. It cannot receive direct signals from the new person's autonomic nervous system in the way that a native heart can. And yet, the transplanted heart functions effectively. It still responds to adrenaline and other circulating hormones that reach it through the blood. It still adjusts its rate and output in response to changes in blood volume. It still sustains life. Recipients of heart transplants sometimes report unusual experiences, feelings, impulses, or sensory impressions that they did not have before the transplant, which they sometimes attribute to some quality of the donated heart. Whether these experiences reflect any true transfer of the donor's imprint is not supported by current scientific evidence, but the experiences themselves are real to those who have them, and they point to how deeply we identify our sense of self with the organ at our center. This is perhaps the simplest and most quietly remarkable fact of all. Through every experience of your life, every morning you have woken up, every meal you have eaten, every conversation you have had, every book you have read, every dream you have dreamed, your heart was there, present, beating, sustaining. You were not aware of it most of the time. You had no need to think about it. It did not require your attention, but it was there, in the first moment of your life, and every moment since, doing the same thing, in the same place in your chest, with the same faithful, patient, continuous rhythm. The heart is the most constant companion any human being has, more constant than any person, any place, any feeling, any thought. It was there before memory began, and it will be there after the last memory fades. It is always present. It is always with you. Research on relaxation and stress reduction has found that listening to a slow, steady heartbeat sound, whether one's own or a recording, can induce relaxation, lower heart rate, and reduce markers of physiological stress. The calming effect is thought to relate to the association between steady heartbeat sounds and the feeling of safety. The connection to the maternal heartbeat heard in utero, or the sense of physiological stability that a steady, regular cardiac rhythm conveys. Some sleep aids and white noise machines include heartbeat sounds precisely because of this calming association. Many caregivers of newborns discover instinctively that holding a crying infant against the chest, where the baby can hear and feel the parent's heartbeat, is often effective in providing comfort. The heartbeat, heard and felt, is a signal of life continuing, of stability, of the basic fact that things are all right. It is the original reassurance. Every human heart shares the same basic design. 4 chambers, 4 valves, the same conduction system, the same coronary anatomy, the same basic pumping mechanism. The hearts of a person born in ancient Rome and a person born today would be physiologically indistinguishable in their essential architecture. And yet, every heart is completely individual. Its rate, its rhythm, its particular variability, the exact branching pattern of its coronary arteries, its size relative to the body it serves, its response to emotion and exercise and rest. All of these are unique to the individual. No 2 ECG tracings are exactly alike. No 2 hearts beat in precisely the same pattern. The heart is both the thing we all share, the universal human organ, the pump that keeps every human life going, and the thing that is most specifically, irreducibly yours. Your heart, the one that has been there since before you were born, the one beating right now in your chest as you rest in the quiet of this evening. In virtually every culture that has left records, the heart has been used as the symbol of the deepest forms of love: romantic love, parental love, devotion to God, or the sacred, compassion for others. The association between the heart and love is as close to universal as any human symbolic association can be. This universality is not arbitrary. It reflects the genuine physiological reality of love's effects on the heart, the racing pulse of new attraction, the warmth in the chest of parental devotion, the ache of absence, the calming of the heart in the presence of the beloved. Love is, among other things, a cardiovascular experience, and the heart, in turn, is shaped by love. The relationships we maintain, the warmth we give and receive, the connections that sustain us. These things, through the physiological pathways of the nervous system, and the immune system and the hormone systems, literally affect the structure and function of the heart over time. We are, in the deepest biological sense, affected at our centers by the love in our lives. At the end of a human life, the sequence in which the organs cease functioning follows a characteristic pattern. The brain can survive only minutes without oxygen before irreversible damage begins. The kidneys and liver can sustain function somewhat longer. But the heart, supplied by its own coronary arteries and driven by its own intrinsic electrical system, can continue beating even after the brain and other organs have ceased, sometimes for minutes, sometimes longer. This is the physiological basis for the ancient association between the heart and the soul. The heart as the last presence of life in a dying body. It is also why, throughout history, the cessation of the heartbeat has been the defining moment of death. Before the development of modern resuscitation, a stopped heart was an irrevocable ending. And even today, in all its medical complexity, the final stopping of the heart carries a finality and a weight that the failure of other organs does not. The heart is first to function in the embryo. It is last to stop at the end. It bookends the entire span of a human life, the faithful, continuous, irreplaceable center of the story, present at the first page and the last. We have traveled through 100 facts tonight, through anatomy and history and emotion and physics and poetry and medicine. And all of it has been circling in the end around the same simple truth. Your heart is beating right now. Not the heart described in textbooks, not the heart of history or the heart of metaphor. Your heart, the specific, individual, irreplaceable heart that has been beating since before you were born, that has carried you through every day of your life, that has been there in every hard moment and every gentle one, that is, right now, in the quiet of this evening, continuing its patient, faithful work. It doesn't need your attention. It doesn't need your gratitude. It will keep beating whether you think about it or not. But tonight, perhaps, it is worth a moment of simple acknowledgement, a quiet turning of the attention inward to the small, warm, endlessly working organ at the center of everything you are. Your heart is beating right now, and that is everything. We have traveled far tonight, from the first beats of a 3-week-old embryo to ancient Egyptian heart-weighing ceremonies, from the sinoatrial nodes quiet firing to a transplanted heart resuming in a new chest, from mitochondria fueling cardiac muscle to the vagus nerve slowing the heart during a long exhale. The heart is both the most studied and one of the most mysterious organs, known in molecular detail, yet full of questions about its meaning, its emotional connection, and its relationship with the brain and self. The heart is a pump, vital and life-saving, but it is also more an electrical, hormonal, and neurological organ, an ecological structure for specialized cells, a social organ sensitive to loneliness and connection, and a cultural symbol of love, courage, and sincerity. And it is yours, faithfully working for you every moment, asking nothing, expecting nothing, giving everything. Let the facts soften now into impression. Let the anatomy dissolve into the simple felt sense of a body at rest. The 4 chambers quietly filling and emptying, the valves opening and closing with their soft, reliable sounds. The electrical wave moving through the conduction system, sinoatrial node to AV node to Purkinje fibers, 60 times per minute, every minute of every day, a quiet internal lightning that never stops. The coronary arteries, filling during the resting pause between beats, delivering the oxygen that makes the next beat possible. The cardiac muscle cells, packed with mitochondria, running almost entirely on aerobic metabolism, tirelessly converting fuel to motion. The pericardium, gently enclosing the whole system in its lubricated sac, allowing the heart to move freely as it works. The vagus nerve, active now as you breathe slowly, gently pressing the heart toward its nighttime pace. The heart rate variability deepening, the interval between beats growing slightly longer and more varied. The signature of a nervous system at ease. The sound, that steady, patient lub-dub, lub-dub, that has been sounding in your chest since before you were born. That has accompanied every moment of your conscious life, every dream you have dreamed, every morning you have woken to. Still sounding now in the quiet, still faithful, still there. Now, let all facts and images dissolve into something simpler, the faint, warm awareness of a heartbeat in your chest. You don't need to find it or focus on it. Just let it be, constant and quiet beneath everything. Feel the weight of your body, the softness beneath you, the warmth of covers or cool air, the subtle rise and fall of your chest. Beneath all this, the beat, your beat, faithful, quiet, continuous. Breathe slowly. With each long exhale, release the day, the undone, the worried, the overthought, into the quiet dark. The heart knows what to do. It has always managed itself, and it will continue through the night, gently and steadily, without your attention or effort. Trust it. Even when you weren't thinking of it, it was there, keeping the thread of your life continuous. Let it slow, ease into its nighttime rhythm while you drift toward needed rest. Your body is safe. Your heart is beating. The world outside does not demand anything from you now. This moment, warm, still, quiet, is all there is. Let thoughts soften, slow and pass like breath. Let the heartbeat be the last thing you notice before awareness itself fades into sleep. Quiet, patient, faithful, always working, always keeping you. Sleep well. Good night. If tonight's journey through the heart, your heart, brought you some peace or some wonder, we would be gently grateful for a like or a quiet subscription, so that future evenings can bring you more long, slow, restful explorations of the most remarkable things in science and nature. There are many more nights waiting, many more quiet journeys through the extraordinary world of living things and the science that seeks to understand them. But for now, there is only this: the quiet, the breath, the beat. Sleep well. Good night.